Hey guys, we're gonna start here. Just started the live stream. Starting in about a couple of minutes. Just going over some quick things here. Would have started earlier, but had some issues with the audio. Um, but it finally got that resolved. So I apologize for the late start. Apologize for the late delay. We'll get started here in about a couple of minutes. Thanks. All right, guys. Hey, first of all, thanks for joining me here on this Monday, April 21st, 2025. And so this is a day that I been thinking about quite a bit about what happened 23 years ago. And this is an important piece, important weather history that happened. Um, I know it's 23 years ago, and you're probably wondering how come I'm not doing this, 2 years later in 2027. Well, the reason why is a lot can happen in 2 years, a lot of things can change. And so I decided to do this now because if you look back at tornadoes that have hit Wayne County since the year 2000, April 21st, 2002, the F3 is still the strongest tornado to have rolled through Wayne County since the year 2000. Now, I understand that there was a tornado in 1990 in the early 90s that went through Albion and went all the way to the northeast, but this is a survivor's account of what happened. I'm going to do a few housekeeping tips here. First and foremost, we have some images of the storm along with damage photos. So I want to do a disclaimer here that all photos shown are from the National Weather Service and Paducah website at weather.gov/Paducah. And so some of you may remember these photos. Some of you may be seeing these photos for the first time. Now, there's only going to be a few of them that I'm going to show, but you can access them on Paducah's website. Also, the live chat is open, by the way, so if you want to comment about the storm, um, I've talked to people over the years about their accounts of the tornado, about the damage that they saw, and so we'll open that up toward the end. But feel free to make a comment on there. So if you happen to maybe survive the tornado, maybe if you saw it, we'd love to hear from you about that, your personal account of it. It could be brief, or you could type up like a paragraph about it. So, and also, there's going to be some individuals that I'll name, and there's going to be some individuals that their names are going to be withheld. But I go off of the facts of what I remember that day, what went on. And there were things that happened that I think some of it was not reported by the media. Some of it was where it may have not been reported in the local papers. But these are details and information that I remember. And so a lot of this is tattooed into my brain, but also understand that this was 23 years ago. A lot of water has rolled beneath the bridge in that amount of time. And so I'm going off of memory, things that I remember, and there's things that I've forgotten since then, but there are some things that I remember very well. So, but anyway, thanks for joining me here this evening. And by the way, the Facebook live stream is public as well. So if you want to hop on board, you can. So I want to provide some background information first before we dive into the storm and what I remember. So it was a Sunday afternoon. It was Sunday, April 21st, 2002. This is the event that got me fascinated with weather. So I remember it was a beautiful sunny Sunday. My father and I went to church that morning. We came back to the house, and one of the things that I remember was hearing about rain and storms, but I never really paid too much attention to it. I was just like, okay, we're going to get rain and storms. From my understanding of that day, just by research on this particular day, there was a moderate risk for severe weather for Southern Illinois at the time. I remember after eating lunch, and I happened to watch the Weather Channel quite a bit. I remember back in the days of Bill Keneally, Mark Mancuso, Paul Walker, I think, was on there back then. Again, this was back in 2002. But one of the things that I remember was the Local on the 8s feature for the Weather Channel. And toward the end of the Local on the 8s was there was a radar. And I remember it would show first kind of like as if the radar was still. Like there was no animation. It was all just like frozen in time, but then it would have animation. And so I remember seeing these storms to the west, and little did I know that one of the storms was going to produce the tornado that tore through Wayne County. And I thought the storms were nasty looking. They were supercells, all right? These were supercell storms that were to our west, and they were moving east. But then, again, this is back in 2002. I was in 7th grade. I was not really focused on the weather. I was focused on basketball. I played. There's a park across the street from my house called Love of Mike Park. I would go there on a regular basis shooting hoops. I was a member of the Center Street School Coats basketball team coached by Marty Slover. And I'll talk more about Marty here in a moment because Marty is currently our assistant coach for softball at Frontier Community College. But I played for Coach Slover. It was after my 7th grade year. I was focused on getting better for 8th grade. But that particular day, even though it was sunny outside, the weather was nice in the 70s, but I was not at the park. There was another thing that I liked doing outside of basketball. I had a Windows 98 computer. Some of you may remember the Windows 98 computer and how mighty and powerful it was back in the day. It came with some preloaded games. Well, guess what? I was a PC gamer. I play games on the Windows 98. And so that particular day I did homework. I played a little bit of games on there. And after lunch, my father would take a nap. He would nap, and he still does to this day. He'll take a nap after lunch on Sunday afternoons. And so So it's pretty common for me to either be in the living room or be in my bedroom, just chilling, playing computer games. And again, the storms are to the west at this point. They had already formed. So now that takes us fast forward to about toward 4 o'clock. Um, and this is where things really get for real. I remember some time had passed, and I remember being in the living room. My father had just woke up from his nap. And I remember turning to the Weather Channel. I don't know where Mom was at. I think Mom was in the kitchen or dining room. And I remember hollering at Dad. I said, "Hey, Dad, there's some storms I want you to see." And so I turned to the Weather Channel. And back then, for the Weather Channel, if there was a severe thunderstorm warning, a tornado warning, the screen would change. And you would hear these loud beeps and followed by the text. And it was from the National Weather Service in Paducah. So I remember had the Weather Channel on, and all of a sudden the screen turned red. I heard these loud beeps, and it said the National Weather Service in Paducah, Kentucky has issued a tornado warning for Wayne County, Illinois until such and such time. But those words, when the screen was red and hearing those beeps, that's when my heart started to race. That's when I started to think about those storms to the west and how they are now in our area. And then the next thing I know, I'm starting to get scared. I'm starting to develop this fear. As a kid, and you've probably been in the same situation before when you were a kid where, you hear the storms of a night and how the lightnings, to me, how lightning strikes sounded like bombs going off when I was a kid. And I would just run to Mom and Dad's bedroom and just hunker down and take shelter there and just be scared of the storms, right? Well, in this case here, I knew that there was something different, but something told me in my gut, man, this does not feel right. This does not feel normal at all. This is not like a normal Sunday afternoon. So then my parents and I were talking about, we live in a double wide trailer. Double wide trailers, tornadoes. Y'all know that double wide trailers, single wide, double wides, not good against a tornado at all. And so then that was one red flag about the National Weather Service. The next red flag was hearing the tornado siren going off. Now understand, where I live, there's a siren to the south of us. And we could hear that siren inside the home. Now understand, tornado sirens are used for outdoor, if you happen to be outdoors, that's what they're used for, right? And so anyway, what I remember was hearing those tornado sirens. So that is the second red flag that just came up. And so now things are starting to get real. Things are starting to get real about this. And so I remember my folks and I, we decided to go to our garage. Now, understand at the time, we had just built this garage not too long ago, maybe about a year or two, but also just 2 or 3 days before this event happened. My father had just built a workbench. My father has carpentry skills, and he built this workbench inside the garage, made out of wood. But you know what? It's like, what would you rather be in? Would you rather be in a garage or would you rather be in a double wide when you have tornado warning being issued and you start to see a storm coming in? So what we did was, we raced to the garage. We went to the garage. My mom brought, I don't know if you guys had them or not back in the day. You may have saw them in stores, but they were these hand crank radios that you could power up. No batteries required, but it was a hand crank radio. It also had like a little solar panel plate on it, so you could have if the sun was shining down on the radio, you didn't really have to crank it up at all. But I just remember Mom bringing it. It was like a blue crank up radio. Now, also keep in mind, back in the day, you didn't have smartphones. you didn't have social media like what we have today. So this is where we just took, we took what was broadcast on the TV. We heard what was broadcast on TV, the sirens, and we have a crank up radio. So we go inside the garage, and I remember Dad saying, "Okay, Derek, go underneath the workbench." I was right there in the corner, and my dad is a deer and turkey hunter, and so he grabs a pair of camouflage overalls and placed them on top of me. Keep in mind, I'm 12 years old at the time. I was a pipsqueak of a kid. I'm not like 6'4" like I was now, but I was like 5'7" and weighed like 100 pounds. I was just like a little tiny pipsqueak back then. And so I remember he placed the overalls on top of me, and then Dad would place some overalls on top of him. My mom was was actually behind us. All three of us are hunkered underneath this workbench. And so Dad gave Mom some overalls as well, and he placed those overalls on top of her. And so at this point, we are thinking to ourselves, is this legit? Is this real? Now, tornado survivors, I've heard their accounts over the years. Some say that there was a great calm before the storm, like everything just dies down, and then you hear the tornado coming. For us, it was like this calm a little bit, and we just thought it was kind of odd a little bit. And so I just remember hearing this sound like I have never heard before in my life. I live not far from a railroad track, an active railroad track, if you will, that runs east and west in town. Heard a lot of trains in my lifetime, but this one was different, like as if like something is coming this way. And I remember just being hunkered down, looking at the corner, and then all of a sudden, wham, I'm hearing the sound of like a freight train barreling through. I'm hearing things like things are just pelting our garage, and I'm just praying to myself in this corner. Like I just remember like having my eyes closed and briefly opening my eyes and saying prayers like, man, this is it. We're screwed. We've got this tornado, this storm that's just barreling through. And I'm just praying, Lord, please keep your protecting hand upon us. Please, because I mean, there's just so many emotions running through right now. And I was talking to my next door neighbor, Ron Tennant, about this a couple of weeks ago. Ron saw the tornado. He saw it coming towards our property. And Ron was home at the time with his wife and kids. And he told me this. He said, I was shocked by how fast this tornado was traveling. He said, and I never will forget seeing the tornado coming through at a high rate of speed. And he said, basement now to his family, because they have a basement. We don't. Now, technically, when Grandpa Dunn's house was on our property, like in our front yard, it had a basement, but we just could not access it. So the garage was our best bet. And so we were hunkered down. The storm was pelting the garage. And the next thing I know, as soon as it started, it stopped. Keep in mind, this was a storm that traveled so fast. And so I remember like hearing this quiet after the sound of a freight train coming through, after the items had been just pounding our garage. And I kept thinking to myself, are we alive? And I know that my father said, hey, Derek, are you okay? I said, oh, I'm okay. He asked my mom if she was okay. My mom said, I'm fine. And so all of us were okay. So no injuries to us. Um, Everything was unscathed. And so I want to show you guys a photo of the tornado. This was photographed by Mary Hurley, and this can be found on the National Weather Service website. This is a photo of the tornado that tore through Wayne County on April 21st, 2002. I can't tell you where this is at, but you can clearly see the funnel. You could see the cloud where the tornado is coming down. It's hard to tell because with the trees in the way, if it is on the ground, and I believe it was on the ground, I do believe at the time this photo was taken, this tornado was on the ground. So this is the F3 tornado, a photo of it. And there are more photos, but I thought this one just has a little bit of a better resolution to it. And again, would like to mention that you can access it on the Paducah's website. And so that is the tornado that came through. I remember we gave some time, we allowed some time to pass before we got up. And so my father took the overalls that he placed on top of us, put them where they were at. And then it was just like thinking, what are we going to see outside after what just happened? And so I remember we opened the door, and we opened our door, and immediately I looked to the south. Understand that I talked about earlier how I played basketball for Center Street. I actually have one of those. I had one of those portable goals, and I still have it with me to this day. It's one of those portable basketball goals that you fill up with water. That water is used as a weight to help prop up the basketball goal. And so I remember seeing it. That thing was full of water, folks. This basketball goal was full of water. The winds were so strong from that storm that it literally blew it backwards. Like it was just laying on its back instead of like where the water goes away over a certain amount of time and then it falls forward. The winds were so strong, blew it right back, almost near the same spot. I remember looking around and seeing pink asbestos and hay, like straw. I remember seeing it littered all over the ground. And the reason why that is because the straw came from my grandpa Dunn's old house, because back then they didn't have the insulation like what we had today. So there was a ceiling, like part of a ceiling on Grandpa Dunn's back porch that had been sheared off, like it was just hanging actually. And there was a lot, like a big pile of that straw on the ground, like on the porch there. And so some of it had gotten littered into the yard. The pink asbestos, I'll show you a photo of where this came from. But those of you may remember H.B. Williamson. Well, I actually had the photo up, and for some reason it's not letting me pull it up. So, but it was, for some reason I couldn't find the photo. I apologize for that. But the pink asbestos came from H.B. Williamson. I do remember that, because we were just wondering where it came from until word got to us. That is where the pink asbestos came from. But perhaps when I think back on my life in terms of horrific sights, this was the most horrific sight I ever saw damage-wise in my life. I've seen damage, storm damage in person, but none compares to this one I'm about to show you. So understand this photo, my home is outside the photo, but this is what we saw. That is my next door neighbor's home. Bill Bruce, Nancy Tomlinson, they lived there in the home. That is their station wagon that the tornado picked up and threw into the living room of their home. Now, understand that they were not home at the time. At first, we thought they were, because you can see how the porch had been just moved. You can see how it's tarped, obviously, but that station wagon was in their driveway prior to the tornado striking the south side of Fairfield. And so that is a photo of their station wagon thrown into the living room of their home. And this photo was taken looking to the east. We were looking at their home like facing north from the south. And so that was next door to us. I will tell you that there was panic. My father ran over to the home, hollered out their names, didn't hear anything. There was some other responders as well that responded there. It was determined they were not home at the time. They had gone away somewhere. So I can't imagine, you know, if they were home that day and that station wagon in the living room of their home. So, but that to me, folks, I've seen again damage from storms, and that to me is still the most horrific, the most horrible visual I've ever seen in my life in terms of storm damage to this day. Another thing too was about their home. There was a gas leak. There was clothes strewn about in the trees. I do not have a photo of it, but I remember one of the trees to the northeast of us, of our property. There was a huge piece of metal just draped on the top of the tree. This metal was, man, probably about 10 to 15 feet in length, about maybe 3 foot in width. And so it was so high up in the tree that my mom made the comment that I hope that this metal does not fall. If someone happened to be walking underneath, I hope that piece of metal does not fall on that on someone below, because it could have killed someone. And so, but again, this site, the most horrific sight I have seen in my life in terms of damage. Um, but again, they were away at the time when it hit. But this is one of the most well-known images of the tornado, the damage it caused. Again, there were clothes drawn about in the trees between us and their property. Um, just it's absolutely terrible, folks. Absolutely terrible. Eventually, they got a new home, but I'll just never forget that sight as long as I live. The gas leak, talk about that. We were telling people, do not light a cigarette, do not turn on your cell phones, because it can cause a spark and an explosion. I'm getting a little bit of ahead here. My dad's pickup truck was parked near the garage. It was actually to the northwest part of the garage. And he had a red 93 Chevy pickup, Chevy Cheyenne. This is the same truck for those of you that went to high school with me, those of you who went to school with me. It's the same truck that I drove. Had a big, huge dent in the tailgate door of the truck. Tires were not punctured. I do not remember any damage done to the front and rear windshield, but the tornado just never picked up the truck at all. Like, it just never moved. And there's been documentation of tornadoes hitting homes where one side of the home is just completely smashed, and then the other side of the home, it's like nothing ever happened to it. And so, our garage, by the way, where we took shelter at, the only thing that I recall damage-wise from it was there was a limb that had kind of gotten wedged on the east side of the building. It just kind of got lodged in there, and eventually we were able to cut it up and everything. But and then our home, in terms of our trailer, there was some insulation again from HB Williamson, where Carter Trucking is at today. There was some of the asbestos that kind of got shoved into kind of like the window a little bit. But other than that, there was also a hole on the roof. My father eventually grabbed a ladder, went up there, and patched the roof of our trailer. And and he was able, that hole was actually in the dining room kitchen area. So considering what I went through regarding our garage, regarding our double wide trailer, we felt pretty fortunate. We felt pretty fortunate about it. Um, let's see. Another thing that I remember was about my grandpa Dunn's old house. I remember my dad had built, I'd mentioned how my father has some carpentry skills. One of the things that he built was he built like this porch swing out of pipe and chain, pretty much. And that porch swing was on the front porch. The tornado sucked it up, basically sucked up the porch swing and threw it over our driveway into the north field. I just remember seeing that and I thought, wow, it just stood out to me. We had our bald cypress tree that we had on the north field of our property. Tornado knocked it down. And so um, it was just, had to cut it up. Eventually it grew right back, but then we had to basically remove the tree a few years ago. It just could never get up to its full strength after the storm. Love on Mike Park. I talked about where I would play hoops at. There was a sign. It would say "Love of Mike Park." It was kind of like one of those arch signs, if you will. That sign was located. So originally, before the storm hit, it was actually on the northeast corner near Rosewood Lane. Um, and the tornado picked up that sign and threw it to the east, and it landed. For those of you locally know where the old railroad is, the old North and South Railroad. Well, some of that borders my property, and so the tornado picked up the Love of Mike Park sign and threw it, and it actually landed in the old railroad. In fact, I actually found it um, in in the old railroad. So, I mean, just unreal power with what this storm actually did. Um, a lot of trees down. We also had no power. Power was out. Um, just it's unreal to me how a sunny Sunday, when it's like the weather was nice, it was beautiful, just turned to chaos in a matter of minutes. And so obviously details would come to light later. But this tornado uh, forever changed Wayne County, and it really triggered my fascination with weather. Um, and so, and again, we didn't have social media. We didn't have, we just didn't really have quite the technology like what we do today. But I want to show you guys an aerial photo. We later learned about Broadway Street in town because we had people, um, and there were so many people walking around. I remember several of our family members came over and checked up on us. We were gathered near the well. So there's an old well still on my property. We were all gathered there as a family, going over the situation, wondering, okay, like deciding who was going to do what in terms of cleanup. And one of the things that I remember was we were all gathered around the well, and I talked about how there was a gas leak and how we were telling people, hey, do not light a cigarette, do not, turn on your cell phone because of the gas leak. And there was a family member of mine, I won't mention a name, but she's a smoker. She wanted to light a cigarette so bad. We had to convince her, like, no, you are not lighting a cigarette at all, because what we feared was, again, gas leak, explosion, it'd be a lot worse. So we finally convinced her after a couple of minutes to not light a cigarette, and she complied. Um, I remember that. I also remember seeing, I talked about Bill and Nancy, how they were gone. When they came back, I remember Carrie and Casey, when they saw their home, after being hit. Um, I remember my father walked over to them and said, if there's anything we could do to help, let us know. And they were great neighbors of ours for years. Um, I'm trying to think. Boy, it's just 23 years ago this day, and it just, your mind goes back in time. There's just so much that happened. Um, I remember people roaming around. Talk about the cigarette thing earlier. I remember there was a man a man who had a bald head. He had a cigarette on his ear. It was not lit. It was unlit. Another thing that I remember was, um, I remember the vehicles just coming down 7th Street. I just remember seeing the vehicles, and this is something that I have preached on for years. It's something that I've learned. Um, I mentioned how and we'll talk about the specifics of the storm, which I've yet to do, but there were people that were injured in this storm. And so I always say that, you know, don't venture out and like be the first to see the damage. I understand that, there are people who want to see things firsthand. I get that. I mean, just countless vehicles. I couldn't keep track. Um, and so one of the reasons why is when you have emergency personnel who are trying to get to someone who is injured, um, it's like you could be impeding emergency personnel to reaching that person. So I don't recall anyone like for us, for our neighbors to the west down Roswell Lane. I don't recall anyone getting injured, not that I'm aware of at all. But you could actually tell by the trees to the west of us, the track that the tornado took. And in fact, there was a neighbor of mine to the west. Um, his home, the guttering is still not the same after that tornado had hit. Um, by the way, time is 7:48. Thanks for joining me here talking about what happened 23 years ago this day, the F3 Fury, the 2002 Wayne County, Illinois tornado, and what I remember. There's a lot of things that I remember that's tattooed in my brain forever. Here's the part that I think gets lost in all of this. So I talked about the vehicles coming down Southwest 7th Street. I talk about how we have people roaming around. They're on foot. They're trying to find, trying to see what all the damage that the tornado caused. It was later on we had heard from people saying, hey, did you guys go down Broadway Street? Did you guys go down Broadway Street in town? And we said, no. Why? And they say, it looks like a war zone. So here's a photo from the National Weather Service of Broadway Street in Fairfield. I remember what Broadway looked like before the tornado hit. And you look at it today, some of it looks the same, but some of it looks completely different. That is a photo of Broadway Street in Fairfield after the tornado had gone through. And I didn't see this until later on. And so Broadway Street has forever changed. There was also some damage on Highland Avenue, but Broadway Street was really hit hard by it. But it was like a war zone for sure. I remember also the people coming out. My grandpa passed away a few years ago. One of my memories of him was watching my grandfather have a chainsaw and just cutting away the trees that had fell in the field. I remember like just several guys with chainsaws, just the never-ending roar of chainsaws, but you had to clean up after what had happened. And that's one thing too. Keep in mind, this tornado hit the Fairfield area just a little after 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. And I always hate to do the what ifs here, but I have to do a what if in this case. Like, what if this storm had hit in the nighttime? What if this storm, we're going to pull up here what happened on this day. So I pulled this up from last year from Paducah, what they posted here. You can actually see how this tornado, how the red line indicates the path that the tornado took. And so you kind of wonder, what if this tornado, instead of like near Sims, kind of went kind of to the south a little bit? What if it had just made a little bit of that kind of like that due east turn? Like instead of going southeast, what if it just hit east? It would have hit the airport. It would have hit downtown Fairfield, but instead it just clipped the south side of Fairfield. So it's just one of those deals that wobbles in the track of a storm happen. And so this is something that that again, downtown Fairfield could have been impacted by this, but instead it just veered to the south. So but that to me is something that I've wondered about, just like the what ifs, But thankfully this hit in the daytime when there were weather spotters. There were people who I think were more aware and alert of what happened. And so anyway, that was the track that the tornado took. I'm going to pull up another photo here. And we later found out about Sims. So here is an aerial photo of Sims, by the way. Now keep in mind, back then, we didn't have the drones like what we have today. This was taken from a plane. I don't know who the pilot was. I don't know who took the photo. But obviously this is the eastern side of Sims, Robertson Welding. And you could actually see Highway 15 right there, 2-lane highway, Highway 15, Robertson Welding on the east side. And then you have tractor trailer just being out there in the field. You just see how that field is just littered with debris. And so we heard about Sims later on. So, but here's the thing. I want to get to the part here that I think some people have forgotten about, and maybe, I don't know if it was ever reported on, I have no idea, but I remember this very well. So I talked about how all of us, we were gathered around the old well, how we were kind of cleaning up after ourselves. I talked about how there was the people walking around, there was the vehicles going down 7th Street. I remember there was a police officer. I remember who he was. I won't mention his name, but there was a Fairfield police officer standing right where Southwest 7th and Rosewood meet at the T. And I remember he picked up his radio and he was conversing with the dispatcher on his radio as the vehicles were passing by. And all of a sudden he hollers out, "There was another tornado coming." He said that there is another tornado coming. Folks, I will never forget. At first we were in disbelief, but he shouted it out. There is another tornado coming. If you have seen the movie clip of when Godzilla strikes Tokyo and how people are just running for their lives, this is exactly what happened. We all just stopped what we were doing and we headed back to the garage. So there was a report of another tornado coming, of another storm coming. So we all go into the garage, my folks and I, along with a few family members. And then as soon as our family members got in the garage with us, they said, "You know what? We're going to seek shelter somewhere else." So they left us. I'm like, "Really, guys? Come on, stay with us. We have plenty of room." Our garage suffered minor structural damage. Again, the only damage that I remember garage-wise was on the east side of the building with that limb. And so the truck was still there, still outside. We couldn't move it inside because we already had a vehicle in the garage. It was only like a one-car garage, one-vehicle garage. And so we had the radio. Mom had that hand crank radio, if you recall, the blue radio that I referenced earlier. And so we hunkered down again underneath the workbench, and Mom had the radio on, and we're tuned into 104.9 WFIW. And I remember Dave Land and Lynn Wells were announcing storm coverage. And eventually, as you guys know locally, years later, I would be working at the same radio station. And I remember they were talking about, they were providing updates of damage, but also talking about this second storm that was coming in. And I remember them saying that the second storm was just a little bit further down to our south and that there was rotation with it. And the rotation was over Spike's subdivision, from what I recall. Um, and so I just remember how we hunkered down again. And then eventually, it did not produce a tornado. But could you imagine having that 1-2 punch where you had one tornado go through and then there's another storm on its heels and it's got some rotation with it? Just can't imagine having two tornadoes hit the same area. And so, but I remember, that I just remember hearing about that second storm. So once the second storm had gone past, we get up off of our shelter underneath the workbench. We go back outside and we start to clean up again. And so I remember my cousin, Sonny Gregory, and I remember I talked about how that front porch had been sucked out of my grandpa Dunn's house, thrown across the driveway into the field. I remember we both picked it up, moved it over. And then I remember the pastor at my church at the time, my old church, he happened to stop by. They were going to have church service. He stopped by, offered his prayers, and said, hey, let us know if there's anything we could do. But just the support from people that day, those who came by and helped, was outstanding. There were all kinds of items in the old railroad that we found. Again, there's that Love of Mike Park sign really stands out. And so I remember that night the power again had gone out still. We were hours without power at the house. But I remember that I believe that the gas leak had been fixed by then, and I was able to basically take a bath in the dark with some candles, actually. So it was like a candlelit bath, if you will, because I had school the next day. Again, this was Sunday. This took place on a Sunday, and it had school the next day. And so I remember taking a bath and then just, going to bed. And so I remember the next day, I rode the school bus to Center Street, and I had people on the school bus saying, hey, D, glad you're okay. By then, the debris from the road had been cleared. And so I remember riding the school bus to Center Street, and I never will forget, before Center Street, before the new gym had been built, for those of you that remember, you had this big playground. You had like 4 basketball goals. You had the 4 square courts on kind of more like the east side of the playground. And I had just gotten off the school bus, and I had a classmate was running up to me, and I could just tell in her eyes that she had been bawling, like she had been crying. And I'll never will forget, she ran up to me, gave me a hug, and said these words, D, I thought you died. And when I heard her say those words, even I myself was starting to get emotional about it. Because again, back then, you didn't have social media. She was probably wondering, thinking about me, like maybe someone had told her, I don't know, that I hadn't heard anything about me and was getting concerned, but she thought that I had died in the tornado. And I'll never forget that. I also remember going back. There's things that I remember, folks. There's things, bits and pieces that I remember. Again, this was 23 years ago. And we'll get to your comments here in a moment. I do see a few comments on the live chat talked about the damage from the storm. One of the things that I remember was my cousin Sonny and I. There was an SUV that pulled up into our driveway, and there was a man with glasses. He had gotten out and he was looking over the damage, and I can't remember what his title was, but apparently he was with the Weather Bureau. He wasn't a news reporter. I don't remember him having a camera, but what I remember was he had pulled into our driveway, and he was with the Weather Service. And I remember we asked him a couple of questions, and one of the questions that I asked him was, based on what you've seen, what do you think the rating of this tornado was? And he said, well, based on what I've seen so far, I'm going to guess an F2, but I can't say for sure, but just based on what I've seen. Yeah, okay. So we're talking strong tornado. Again, this is not, the enhanced Fujita scale did not come into play until years later. So we're the tornado rating back then was just Fujita scale. Different than what it is today. So I remember he came up and we talked to him for a few minutes, and then he left. My father at the time was working for the city of Fairfield Gas Department. One of the coworkers, Gary Tracy, some of you may remember Gary, and his wife Kathy live in Tennessee now. I remember back in the days when you could take like a VHS tape and just, record something off the TV. Gary and Kathy had recorded coverage of the tornado. And this is from the St. Louis market that I recall, the St. Louis TV stations. And I thought it was interesting. So after the news that it was an F3 tornado that tore through Wayne County, there was one TV station in St. Louis. I don't know why, but for some reason, they said it was an F4. I was kind of surprised by it. Like the majority of the TV stations in St. Louis said F3. This one TV station in St. Louis said F4. I don't know why. So anyway, it was just really, crazy. And then we started to see more images over the course of time, like homes such as this one that were damaged by the tornado. I don't know where that was at, but again, all these photos that you see, again, are from the National Weather Service in Paducah. It's on their website. You had to do a Google search in order to find it, but try to find like April 2002 tornadoes, and that's one of the homes that have been damaged by the tornado. For those of you who just joined me here, this is my next door neighbor's home with their station wagon thrown into the living room of their trailer. So, and that is facing east. And obviously my home is outside the camera shot there. But we're looking at, again, their home looking north. So I want to, but obviously cleanup continued in the days ahead. There was some national coverage of this as well. Sadly, there was one person who lost their life due to the storm. This was an individual who was 47 years old. He actually, he died in his mobile home 4 miles west of Wayne City. I remember years later, the Wayne County Press every year does the graduation edition, and I remember the man's name. I won't say his name, but I remember seeing his son as one of the seniors from Wayne City that had graduated years later, and seeing the deceased person's name that he listed as his parents. So I do remember that. So let's talk about the tornado here. This tornado, again, an estimated peak winds of 200 miles per hour, about 30 to 35 mile path length. The path width of the tornado was about a quarter of a mile wide. It moved east northeast at 50 miles per hour. That's the thing with tornadoes. There are some tornadoes that move slow, and there are some that travel fast. And this one was traveling at a pretty decent clip. I talked about Ron Tennant's account of it and how he said that this tornado was fast moving as he actually saw it. Um, so let's pull up here the path here of the storm here, so you could actually see here. I'll read this along here. This entered Wayne County about half a mile north of Illinois Route 15. It passed north of Sims, north of Wayne City, struck the southern side of Fairfield, causing major damage. Where I currently live at today is the path of that tornado that it took. Continued just south of Golden Gate. It went north of Merriam, and it weakened and dissipated near Ellery in eastern Wayne County, just shy of the Wayne-Edwards County line. There were 42 treated in hospitals. 13 of them were critical. There were 35 homes destroyed. 16 more received major damage as well. Some of the destruction examples again, talked about how my next door neighbor, Bill and Nancy, how their station wagon was thrown into the living room of their trailer home. How a tavern, Lonzo's Tavern near Sims, was completely leveled, was just destroyed by it. Well-constructed homes that lost roofs and exterior walls. Trees and power lines snapped or uprooted across multiple areas. This tornado was associated with a supercell. And in fact, the storm was part of a larger regional outbreak affecting the Midwest. The average wind speed was 130 to 170 miles per hour, with localized areas reaching F3 intensity. We were underneath a moderate risk of severe weather that day. There was strong wind shear that was present, allowed storms to rotate, making conditions favorable for supercells and tornadoes. The setup, by the way, in case you're wondering, there was a surge of warm, humid air from the Gulf of Mexico that traveled northward into our area. Temperatures were in the 70s. I know over at Evansville, for example, when I researched it earlier, the high for Evansville that day was 81. Dew points were in the 60s. There was a cold front from the west, and a dry line setup provided the trigger for storms to develop. And these features helped storms rapidly intensify as they moved into a very unstable atmosphere. Again, folks, I have some notes here outside the camera shot. But it was a strong low pressure system that moved through that day. I'll get to your comments here. By the way, guys, if you just happen to join here, talk about if you saw the tornado, if you saw the damage, if you saw any damage, let me know in the live chat. I would actually like to read your accounts of that day, and I'll read them as well here toward the end. So what can we take away? What can we take away from this experience? One is, I think the importance of having advanced warning. Going back to the Weather Channel with the National Weather Service in Paducah, when they had that text appear on screen, when you had the tornado sirens going off, even though we were indoors at the time, but yet we live near a tornado siren down to the south, and how those sirens were blaring. That's the key about having advanced warning when you have a tornado warning that's issued. Just having that advanced warning really helps. And had it not been for that advanced warning, there's no telling what we could have saw. I also think about weather safety and preparation. We live in a double wide. We went to the garage, went underneath the workbench, had overalls placed over us. I also say this when it comes to severe weather coverage I've done on here. Didn't have it on, but obviously grab like a bike, a motorcycle helmet, something that protects your head from flying debris, because a lot of fatalities from tornadoes happen with blunt force trauma to the head. When I look back at this event 23 years later today, this really triggered my fascination with weather. I had a classmate of mine tell me one time years ago that they said, "Hey, I can see you being a meteorologist, D. I can see you being a meteorologist one of these days." And so, I'm not a meteorologist by any means. I'm not licensed. I just enjoy tracking storms, even like those that are out of state as a hobby. I still enjoy tracking them. So, um, let me see here. Also, I think with social media, now today, how radar's gotten so much better with velocity data, correlation coefficient, um, how radar technology has just advanced within the past, 20 plus years, social media, live streaming, all of that has just really helped in terms of storms and everything. And so that is that's really come a long way as well. So I've been live streaming for a little over an hour. And so if you guys have any if you have any like memories about this, maybe you saw the tornado, maybe you saw the damage. I see here some people have posted comments about it. Got John here. Hi, John. Good to hear from you. He was fishing while it hit his house. Well, John, I tell you what, glad you are alive today. I was alive as well. I heard the roar of the storm. Tornadoes sound like a freight train coming through. A lot of survivors say that, and this one certainly did. Jason commented he was at Sims Crossroads with brothers playing in mud with pickups, and he watched it take out Sims Tavern. That's scary. I just can't. I have not seen a tornado with my own eyes in person. I've seen footage, obviously. I've seen, photos, and I showed the photo earlier of the tornado. Again, this was photographed by Mary Hurley. I don't know where this photo was taken at, but definitely a rural area somewhere. But that is the tornado that that came through Wayne County. So there's a photo of that. Let me see here. See if there's any more comments. But I will say though that Carrie, I talked about you earlier. Carrie, a friend of mine. And Carrie, I remember when you and your folks came home. I remember when you guys arrived and seeing the destruction. And Carrie, I did show the image of the station wagon in the living room of your guys' trailer. But I never will forget that because we were really all of us were concerned. We hunkered down, we took shelter. It was just after the tornado had moved through that we saw the station wagon in the living room of the trailer, and we were really concerned for you guys. And so that image, seeing that station wagon, all the clothes strewn about in the trees, the asbestos, all that, Carrie, I still have not forgotten. And also too, by the way, hello to you and your family. And I'm so glad that we're, excuse me, sorry about that. I need a drink of water soon. I'm so glad that we're friends. And so, I still think of your mom highly. I miss your mom. I still think of Bill highly. Two great next door neighbors of mine that I'll never forget. And so, but it's good to hear from you. I'm getting a little emotional. Sorry about this, guys. I'm starting to think about those two. But I'll tell you what, they were great neighbors of ours for years. Man. But I'll tell you what, I still think about both of them. I still think about how I can't imagine what would have happened if you guys were home that day, and just I can't imagine. Can't imagine it. But I want you to know, Carrie, that your family still think about you guys. Still want to come over here. So if you have any birthday parties coming up, invite me over. It was great to be at your house last year. Felt like it was old times again at your parents' house. Oh man, folks, this is why I said earlier, why now instead of 2 years later? A lot can happen in 2 years, guys. And this is where I still get emotional. I've had nightmares in my sleep about tornadoes. I've had nightmares about multiple tornadoes hitting me at once, and it's just like I still get emotional thinking about it. For some reason, the my thing, been monitoring the feed on my Facebook, and it's it was kind of like as if it was like a GIF a little bit. It was like as if I was blowing bubbles on there. I had to reboot that. But that's the thing too. I think about what if that tornado had just went just feet to the south, instead of like, hitting Bill and Nancy's trailer. What if it just hit our trailer? What if it hit our garage where we were at? I can't imagine it. I can't imagine it. But Carrie, again, thanks for hopping on here. And I know that you probably have had maybe some bad thoughts like I have about this storm, but there's things that we can learn from it. There's things that we can learn from a storm such as this. Again, advance warning, being prepared, always being ready. I think back to mid-March, I remember mid-March of this year when Stuart Morris said, hey, Fairfield came really close to having a tornado move through. And so the rotation was aloft at the time. But folks, we've had an EF2 hit the west side of town, the golf course and Lakeview. That happened years ago. We also had a small tornado hit my cousin's house southwest of here. We have had many storms over the years, and I will tell you that also learning from this experience too about that day, for us here, we were fortunate when others were not so fortunate. And it's a reminder that life is fragile. You don't know what each day is going to bring. You don't know. I said, this is why I'm doing it now instead of like 2 years later when I may not be here in 2 years. I don't know. I hate to say that, but boy, I tell you what, this is why I'm doing this now. A lot can happen, but it's also a reminder that we are blessed more than we deserve. And that day, my folks and I were fortunate that we didn't have like where our home was destroyed, where our garage was destroyed. And so, but man, I tell you what, just still think about it. 23 years later, I still think about it. So, guys, I'm starting to get hungry. I've not had supper yet. I've endured this hunger. But folks, I know that this was long. I know that it was over an hour that I've been live streaming here. But I wanted to tell my story because I wanted to get it out there because there were details about that day that that I've never really told. There's the facts. It's good to be, it's a reminder that we were hit once with a tornado, the strongest tornado that hit Wayne County since 2000. We could get hit again. And this is why I preach during the live streams about taking shelter when a tornado warning is issued. Always have a plan. Always be ready. Always be weather aware. Because I tell you what, folks, we're in an active time of severe weather. Severe weather can happen any time of the year, but this is an active period for it. And we've seen some severe weather outbreaks already. We've had storms come through here lately. I know I've talked to people saying, I'm tired of these storms coming through. I know. I feel your pain. I feel your frustration. But again, it's an active time of year. So I stress here, have a severe weather plan. If you don't have one in place, come up with one. There's articles that you can have here. Pack some supplies. Um, Always check your stock if you have like food or whatever, bottled water as well. But always be prepared, always be ready because, again, advance warning helped us out that day, being prepared, hunkering down for shelter. And so anyway, guys, I'm rambling on. I gotta stop. I gotta stop. But 23 years later, guys, 23 years later, and let me read here before I go. I want to read to you what Paducah. I know Paducah posted, and I'll pull this up again here. What they had posted that day, but I want to pull up here on my on my on my laptop here off screen about some information here about this, and there's a little bit more information than what is on here. So the tornado entered Wayne County about a half mile north of Illinois Route 15, then proceeded to move northeast to a point about 1.5 miles north of Wayne City. The tornado then paralleled Route 15 just north of Sims. A tornado continued moving east toward Fairfield and passed through the southern part of Fairfield with F3 intensity winds. This is where I live at today. The tornado then traveled slightly south of east toward Golden Gate. The tornado weakened east of Golden Gate and finally dissipated in extreme eastern Wayne County near Ellery. A sole fatality occurred 4 miles west of Wayne City when a 47-year-old man was killed inside his mobile home. Of the 42 hospital-treated injuries, 13 were critical. A total of 35 homes were destroyed and 16 received major damage. The average wind speed in the tornado was 130 to 170 miles per hour with peak winds at or approaching 200. The F3 damage was located near Sims, southern sections of Fairfield, near Merriam, and areas west and north of Wayne City. Vehicles were picked up and deposited in houses. Well-constructed houses lost roofs and some walls. Weaker structures, including a tavern near Sims, were demolished. So that's a little bit more detailed information about about the tornado. So, but again, no, guys, I hope this video, I hope that this video, I know it's a slice of weather history, but again, I thank God for his blessings that day. I thank him for his protecting hand upon us all. And I preached about sermons about storms and everything. And so, but anyway, guys, that's about all I've got to say. I'm rambling on. I got to stop. So, but I still think about it. And this is why, guys, this is what got me into weather. This is what got me into doing what I do here with the live streams here. And I know you guys, the support, the encouragement I've received this year regarding the live coverage of severe weather. Guys, it does not go unnoticed. It's greatly appreciated. And it's something that I enjoy doing because I learned from this experience and I care about you all. And I want you all to know that I want you all to be weather aware, always be ready. And that day with the community support, helping us out in a time of need, whenever there was chaos and destruction all the way around, people saying, hey, we're here for you. Give us a call if you need help. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. Guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. That's all I've got. But thanks for tuning in. I apologize for the late start due to audio issues. So severe weather-wise, in case you're wondering for the future, so far I have not heard anything. Later on this week anyway, I've not really looked, but I just know that the outlooks I've seen so far anyway, looking ahead, I know that we have some rain chances Friday and Saturday, but I'm not expecting, not seeing severe weather at this time for the for the Storm Prediction Center. So good news right there. But again, as I always say, be weather aware. So thanks guys for hearing my story. Eventually I would like to do a documentary of this. If any of you guys are interested in that, maybe want to partake in it in person, um, reach out. May do maybe a couple of years, maybe, if Lord willing. So thanks, guys. Well, for the rest of your night. Thanks for joining me here. By the way, it will be archived once I end the live stream, and you guys can share it. I know it's long, but just wanted to get my story out there about how I survived the F3 tornado that tore through Wayne County April 21st, 2002.